Hi, I'm Jim Christy from the Defense Cybercrime Center up in Baltimore, Maryland. And this is Meet the Fed and ex-Feds. So kind of what we're hoping is going to happen here is we're going to break this thing up into two panels. The first panel is going to be kind of the policy folks, incident response folks, CERT folks, and then the second panel is going to be the law enforcement counterintelligence folks. Okay, so we're going to go about 30, 35 minutes and then switch panels. So please ask the right group the question that you have. Okay, so what we'd like to do, since Rich has had so much spotlight time since he's been here, we'll start at the other end. Oh, Mark, you too.
You pick somebody else.
Okay, Mark, we'll start with you. If everybody just do a 2 or 3 minute intro on who you are, what you do regards to cyber. Thanks.
And do these microphones work?
They're
just
on
the
all the
light's not
time.
on. Okay.
Quit touching the microphone.
Quit touching the little gizmo. All right, Mark Sox. I am ex-DHS. I was there when we opened the doors. I was the only guy that had cyber on my business card in the early part of 2003, and retired military. Used to be at the White House. Currently at Verizon, I'm the big bad evil ISP guy that everybody likes to throw darts at.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Greg Garcia. I run my own consulting firm now called Garcia Strategies LLC, a very catchy name. I was the first Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity and Communications under President Bush from 2006 to 2008, having left last December. I had not just cybersecurity in my portfolio, but also the National Communications System, which ensures the availability and integrity of our communications in times of national emergency, and also the Office of Emergency Communications, which built up a national strategy for interoperable comms. So I'm glad to be with you today.
Lynn Wells, I'm now at National Defense University. Before that, I spent 16 years in the Office of Secretary of Defense, including 2 years as the acting DoD CIO and ASD for networks. I guess my main point now is that we've just done a paper on social software and national security and how the government needs to find a better job of making use of all these tools that the rest of the world is leveraging. So if anyone would like a copy, there's some up here. Free.
Bob Lentz, I'm the Chief Security Officer in DoD.
I'm Michelle Kwan. I'm the Director of US-CERT.
Colonel Mike Convertino, Commander of the 318th Information Operations Group in San Antonio, Texas.
Nobody heard that. Use the microphone, please.
Sorry.
I always want to tell Colonel to do that stuff.
Can't get it to work. Well, there we go.
It's always on.
There we go.
Don't touch any buttons.
It's not on. Yeah, I'm Colonel Mike Convertino from the Air Force. I command the 318th Information Operations Group down in San Antonio.
Rich Marshall, first generation deadhead. I was also the legal architect for Eligible Receiver 97 that put information warfare, cyber warfare on the map, brought it to national attention, the president on down, etc. Then I worked for Dick Clark in the White House helping to draft the cybersecurity strategy, which if it had been not over-coordinated and properly implemented, we would not be facing some of the problems that we're facing today. And my main message, I guess, that I deliver to the Hill, since I handle legislative affairs for the agency on the information assurance side, is that cybersecurity is not a new issue. It's been around since Y2K.
Okay, we're opening it up to the floor for questions for this panel. And we got a couple of microphones floating around. Deb, raise your hand. Matt?
Jim, there's one more. You got one more ex-Fed.
Oh, the guy who was late. Okay. Take a lap, Jerry.
I'll blame the CISO for the state of California for tying me up. No, Jerry Dixon, currently with Team Cumry, a not-for-profit, a security research group. Before that, I ran the National Cybersecurity Division, US-CERT, the IRS Incident Response Team. So basically 9 years focused on really operational security. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
Okay, first question. All right, low incentive. I have a coin for the first question. Oh, we got one up front. It's only a quarter.
That's all right. You can keep it. My question revolves around the new administration and our do we think that we're going to be getting better with national security, especially from a cyber warfare standpoint under the new administration? A lot of people in my industry are concerned around privacy issues and some of the mandates, I guess you'd call them, about electronic healthcare records and making those available, which kind of scares a lot of people in the security industry. Do you think we're moving in the right direction?
The DHS folks want to know your name and social security number. Would you pass this down? Anybody want to take that question?
I'll take it.
Greg?
Okay, so as the ex-Fed, I can say things more freely. Actually, your question is two parts. One is sort of substantively what, you know, and you can name your part of cybersecurity or privacy, and what policy directions will follow. The other, what I'm going to address is, are we going to be any better off because of the new organization, the new administration? And that's kind of what I want to address. We have right now, we're waiting to have the appointment of a cyber czar. The cyber czar is, it's designed in a way that it's got two bosses, reporting to the National Economic Advisor and the National Security Advisor, and intended to coordinate with the White House Chief Technology Officer and the White House Chief Information Officer. At the same time, needs to herd the cats at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, National Security Agency, the Department of the Director of National Intelligence. And so you see, you've got a pretty big shoes to fill in terms of an organizational structure and the actual coordinating of policy in a way that is clean, deconflicted, and effective. And so I'm very skeptical about the way it's currently being organized for any cyber czar to succeed in that job.
Mike?
One of the things that you mentioned was the warfare part. Your question had two parts, and I'll address the warfare part because that's kind of my bag. But and Rich will help me out and keep me straight, I'm sure. But as far as cyber or internet type warfare goes, that sort of thing is going to be handled within the DoD by there's already a new organization created under the U.S. Strategic Command called U.S. Cyber Command. It's a sub-unified command underneath that organization that's meant to handle those sorts of things. So in answer to your question, that is significant progress in that regard. There's a focal point for that behavior too. So that individual is going to be dual-hatted, Director of NSA and Director of U.S. Cyber Command. And that's why I said Rich will keep me straight on the rest. As far as the NSA role goes, that's Title 50, which is essentially intelligence collection efforts and analysis, and Title 10, which is the military defense end of it. So that's kind of how that's worked out so far. As far as that arrangement's relation to your privacy and all the rest of it, those things in our minds are divorced. We are an outward-looking entity from that point of view.
I'm going to make some general observations about your question. I'm not going to critique your question. I'm going to just make some intellectual observations, perhaps, about the tenor of your question. You're not going to have privacy without cybersecurity, number one. You're not going to have economic security without national security, and vice versa. They all go hand in hand. It's like a glove, and the glove should fit. There are too many leaders in Washington, or would-be leaders, that want to take charge of this. Standard joke on the Hill is if you walk in the Senate and say, "Hey, Mr. President," every one of them turns around. Now we've gotten to the point, if you walk into the House of Representatives and say, "Mr. President," they all turn around. Because they all want to be in charge of cybersecurity, because cybersecurity is a hot button issue. Why is it a hot button issue for them? Because of anthrax. The way they communicate with their constituents is a BlackBerry or a PDA. Not a commercial endorsement.
Too late. Any other lawyers out there?
Thanks, Rich.
An iPhone, yeah, sure, right. If you try to write a letter to your congressman, it goes to a special post office in Washington where they look at it for anthrax, which means they run it through a chemical process, which means the substance of the contents are destroyed. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? So if you want to communicate with your representatives, and I encourage you to do so, do it via email. They read it. They constantly read it. If you watch C-SPAN and watch them wandering around, they're always looking at their BlackBerries because their staff is telling them what to do, which I think is kind of fun.
Next question. We got one in the middle here, back against the wall. A little hustle here.
Where's the microphone? Oh, this microphone.
Deb, just say it's on Matt's side. Matt, move out here.
Can you talk a little bit about cyber espionage? We read about it all the time, and I'm wondering, to what extent does it really go on? Which countries are the players, and is the United States
Would you like a
involved
list
in
of
it?
all our subjects and countries and,
Yes, yeah, please.
and tactics and techniques that they're using too? What are you, nuts? Okay,
He's a
next
communist
question.
spy. Stand up and be shot, sir.
We'll save that one for the next panel.
So what's your policy about your agencies buying zero-day exploits, and how do you make them public, or do you?
That sounds like a US-CERT.
That was the spy's cell phone going off behind you. See, he's answering it. He's being called by the criminals.
Could you repeat the question? I don't think they got it.
I was wondering, what's your policy around your agencies buying zero-day exploits?
Buying?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't buy zero-day exploits.
She's
I don't do that.
Anybody want to take that?
We buy 0 days?
Or let me rephrase, not buying, but using them.
I got a coin. That's all I got, man.
I don't do that either.
Well, I can tell you we have a policy, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
Well, bring it up when you come back up. The lady right there.
I actually have two questions. One is, what can you tell us on the status of the TIC initiative for the Trusted Internet Connections? And as far as FSMA compliance, because you're all from different agencies, where are we at with getting to one standard as far as certification and accreditation?
Well, I can tell you, as far as the TIC initiative is concerned, it is moving along. We have 6 departments and agencies who have currently gone through TIC validation. We're not saying that it's perfect, but they're moving in the right direction. And that will continue to move over time. That's a big project. It's going to take a while, but it's a good effort, and it's going forward. What was your second question?
It was about certification and accreditation with the different agencies represented. Each one of you has a different standard, and I heard the move was to go to one standard.
I'm going to let Bob handle that one.
Yeah, well, I think the good news is that we all have a common standard 853. Ron Ross and NIST have done a phenomenal job, and the communities have all come together. We're working on reciprocity decisions and common risk management boards and things like that. But I think we've made enormous progress in the last year or so. I'm not exactly sure that's going to translate to the FSMA legislation, but I think from the standpoint of CNA, certification and accreditation, I think there's enormous progress that's been made in that area.
Gentleman right here.
We talk about having cybersecurity and understanding the nature of the threats that we're facing. And it seems to me that having a strong sense of identity for origination of information and for transport of information is a critical part of being able to provide that capability. What are we planning as a nation to help us provide that kind of identity information, both of individuals and of equipment?
Is that my attribution?
Attribution is part of it. Being able to have queries that result in, or actions that result in effective activity on server ends, for instance, that should be non-repudiated, whereas you have other things that you want as anonymous queries, you're just looking for information.
The networks are not really designed to do what you're asking, and so we have to change the networks a little bit. But that being said, there is some good in anonymity. You as a private citizen would probably like to have that ability to communicate somewhat anonymously if you'd like to. But the endpoints of devices, computers, switches, things like that, do not necessarily need to be anonymous. And in fact, we need to be able to control and manage them. But the network protocols weren't really designed with that in mind. And so there's some technology advances we need to have. But the conversation around this tends to revolve more in the privacy world, the desire to be able to communicate without anybody eavesdropping. And so now how do we balance that? How do we give the people who want to have truly anonymous communication and thought to allow that while still being able to manage devices and end pieces? It's a hard question. This administration is not going to answer that, but we have to have those conversations.
You got to remember the internet's global, so whatever we do here in the U.S., you got to take into account that maybe not every other country is going to sign on to that. So you always got to keep that international piece. When you get into role-based access control or identity management within a corporate environment, it's fairly easy to do from an enterprise perspective. But when you're doing it, when you start talking about it at the internet level, that's a huge challenge and issue. And whether anybody would really want to have that level, again, back to keeping anonymity.
Which leads you to the point about some activities you definitely do not want anonymity, like critical infrastructure protection perhaps and things like that.
Right.
In other places you have to protect anonymity. So it's going to be, I think, as you said, that some sort of a diverse network rather than just a homogeneous one.
Anybody else want to? Okay, next question. We have one over here.
DOD spends a lot of money dealing with outside people trying to get into DOD. Do you see, you mentioned the invention of a cyber team, do you see someone focusing more on the insider threat? What is DOD doing to deal with people inside of DOD? Sabotaging networks, things of that nature.
Well, we first of all have a insider threat task force, number one, that works across the department to improve a lot of the process mechanisms we have to deal with that. And there are a number of programs that we have in place to deal with that. Second of all, we've got a number of tools that we're deploying on the network. There's a number of commercial tools now that are available. In fact, we have a new enterprise RFP that's going to be going out on the streets in the next 6 months for some additional tools that will be out on the network looking for anomalous behavior and things like that. So there's a whole host of things that we're doing to deal with the insider threat. We're very much aware of that. We have a lot of teams that deal with it. So I think there is a lot of good news to that, very serious and important problem.
Let me hop in on that for just a second. The insider threat, while a problem, sometimes gets overblown. The number of reports have shown that significant breaches are not being caused by insiders, but by trusted third parties and things that are not necessarily insider related. So we need to focus on insiders, of course, but don't see that as the holy grail. If we can make that go away, all the security problems disappear.
The related piece is when someone has gotten in from the outside, they're functionally indistinguishable from a cleared insider in terms of someone who's wandering around your network. So all three, third party, trusted insider, and outside anomalous behavior need to be looked at.
By the way, again, on the identity issue, another very important part of insider threat is strong identity protection and management, because it's just as important for information sharing as it is for dealing with things like the insider threat. If everything on the And the company has an identity that allows you to be able to deal with that issue much more effectively. So they're both interlocked there.
Next, we have one right up front here.
So my question is on supply chain. We talk a lot about preventing people, firewalls from getting into systems, but when the system is made elsewhere, the threat vectors, the attack vectors are significantly different. It's more than just hacking. What are your thoughts on that? Where are we going as a nation?
I heard you better without the microphone.
I'll repeat the question for everybody.
Okay.
It has to do with globalization and supply chains, and where are we going with the fact that most of our products are made in overseas and not here in the United States. And I think we can all probably comment to this, so I'll be really brief, but we face a different situation now. If you take just national security, pre-fall of the Soviet Union, the Soviets had their nukes, we had our nukes, we had mutual assured destruction, but our nukes were built here, their nukes are built there. If we move into this new world, if cyber warfare begins to happen or we begin to kind of mess with each other's systems, our weapons are actually built in China. And China's weapons are built here in the United States. And we flip-swap this stuff. And so who actually owns the intellectual property and who's been building each other's weapon systems? It's a really crazy world. But we don't go backwards. We are globalized. There's no way we're going to bring that industrial base of China back to the United States just to build our IT products here. And there's no way that what we do in the United States is going to be shifted back to other countries, that we all are interlocked together. So it's a strange new world where we will be fighting future wars using our enemy's technology, developed and built in their country, and turned right around and used at it. And they will be using our technology that we built, sitting on their end, fighting back to us. And we just have to accept that.
I'll accept that, and I'll let Bob speak to this as well. I mean, I think what you're referring to also is network communications equipment, IT equipment manufactured abroad with a backdoor implanted, and when you install it, it phones home for whatever purposes the implanter has in mind. So DHS and DoD started last year to undertake an effort to sort of build with the private sector efforts to provide some level of assurance. What are the standards of practice for assuring the integrity of the supply chain, all along the supply chain? And if you're going to sell to the government, how can you certify, if that's the right word, maybe it's too strong a word, but provide the assurances that it won't phone home when it's plugged in? And that's a long and difficult process, because of all the different business models and partnerships across the supply chain that need to be taken into account. So, I'm working with very small companies who have to tell their larger customers where that particular product was made, and vice versa. So it's a very difficult process, and maybe Bob can provide some update on that.
And just in that model, most people think about the cybersecurity or the protection during the operational phase. There are actually something like 7 different phases of a life cycle. And if you can talk about supply chain, you really have to get back into the product design, and then the conceptual phase is not just look at what got shipped from what container today.
I just want to add to that. I mean, we're still at the stage where we're not taking care of the low-hanging fruit. I mean, whether you're talking about SD-Bot, it's still everywhere. Whether you're talking about Configure, it's still everywhere. We got so much low-hanging fruit that we got to take care of. I mean, yeah, that's an issue, but we're not even doing the basic stuff right now to get us to the level of protection or defense where, for the country where we need to be.
Let me add a couple of observations to that. America as a country spends more money on astrology than we spend on research and development in cyber, well, in research and development, period, but specifically in cybersecurity. There are elements of our society, not just limited to the intelligence community, but the banking industry, the defense industrial base, et cetera, that would feel a lot more comfortable if the cyber-related technology they were using was born in America. I'm working with 2 individuals, Robert Rodriguez out in California, a former Secret Service agent who's got a company that is, well, it's an educational effort on the national level, and with Pascal Levinson, who is a venture capitalist, to try to reverse that trend, to try to help make sure that there is money to be invested in small startups, cybersecurity related. Now, having said that, we are not anti any country. This is a global issue. But there are certain technologies that we would feel more comfortable about using if we knew from cradle to grave whose fingerprints were on them. We're a little reluctant to use systems that may have undocumented features.
Of course, you want to talk about what we did in 1982 to the Russians?
No.
Okay.
Got a question up there and one down here.
I hear a lot of addressing of technical issues, low-hanging fruit, but one thing I've noticed as an academic, recent academic, I used to work in the real world, there's a missing number of people. I mean, the federal government's short on employees. I know a lot of corporations are looking for people. How do we address the people side of this to stabilize, like, you know, one director of NCSD that lasts longer than, you know, et cetera. But how do we get the numbers of people? And I don't think scholarships are the answer because it's not working. I have tons of foreign students, but I'm not seeing a lot of diversity, shall we say, wanting to step up and play in this game.
You're scratching a sore spot on me, and you know it, Art.
You're welcome, Mr. President.
Well, I am proud to count Art, as weird he is, as one of my friends. As a matter of fact, my daughter has commented that all of my friends are a little sketchy, I think is the word she uses. The National Security Agency, along with the Department of Homeland Security, in a very aggressive partnership, Michelle Kwan is one of my very close colleagues, sponsor every year the cybersecurity centers of academic excellence, and there's close to 80 of them now, and I think it's a great idea to have one in every congressman's district, because then that helps ensure funds. That's just a thought. But I'm gratified to report that Northeastern University, which is one of the schools that I work with up in Boston, has more U.S. citizen PhD candidates in cybersecurity than this country has produced in 10 years. I think that's a trend. I think we're reversing it. Now, not every one of those U.S. citizens were born in the United States. They don't have to be. But the fact that they're U.S. citizens makes them eligible for security clearances, which makes them eligible for specialized programs, not just within the government, but in the private sector, where we know that's where the major money is. You know, if you read Dan Brown's first book, I love Dan Brown as an author, but read him the most recent book first, and then go back in time. Digital Fortress was absolutely ludicrous. I mean, NSA is run by a lieutenant colonel.
You weren't that for me, right?
A signing bonus is a Porsche. It's bizarre. Okay. I feel better having said that.
Let me just add to that. Rich was right. The Centers for Academic Excellence is a great program. It's very successful. I think actually there's more now, Rich, than 80. I think it's like closer to 95. And these are colleges and universities, some of them research colleges and universities that are certified by NSA and DHS as having certain curricula and best practices in managing their own networks. But there's another program that was that continues to be successful, and it's CyberCore and the Scholarship for Service program. So for every student who wants to make a career in cybersecurity, we pay 1 or 2 years of their tuition in return for their committing the same amount of time, 1 or 2 years, to working in a federal agency, and in this case, in cybersecurity. There's a lot of young, fresh blood that's really enthusiastic. The real problem is and this is my experience at DHS, is I think Rich alluded to it, is the hiring process in federal agencies, particularly in DHS, which is slow and cumbersome security clearance process. It's almost a discouragement for young people to get involved in working for the government because of the arduous process, the long waits, all the bureaucracy and forms to fill out versus a higher paying job in the private sector that moves much quicker. So we have to balance out, high pay and quick process with serving the national interest. And that's really what this boils down to, is appealing to people's patriotism and the cool jobs you really can get in the government, and really serving the national interest, something bigger than yourself.
Let me be critical of DHS, the institution, not the people, of which I've got quite a few friends in DHS. Being retired military, there is a career path for everybody who comes in the military. Doesn't matter if you're coming in right out of high school, right out of college, however you do it, there is a career path. We know what the upward mobility cycle is. We know when we're going to get promoted. We know how it works. When you go into DHS at the headquarters level, not talking about down inside a Coast Guard, place like that, but the headquarters level, that career path doesn't exist. I cannot go apply for a job at headquarters DHS and be able to see what my career is going to look like in front of me, other than just the plain Jane generic, GS worker type of thing. With no career path, with no options for upward mobility, with no way of knowing how do I make it all the way up to assistant secretary someday, why am I going to stick around? And particularly with all the headaches and the crap and everything that's thrown at you, we have created a disincentive environment for good people to stick around. So if we fix this, we've got to have some type of esprit de corps like we have in other organizations, some sense of belonging, some sense of knowing that you can grow up in that organization. So when you come in young, you come in bright, you want to make a career of it, a career is available to you. And not after 4 or 5 years, you just find out this is nuts and run off to the private sector, because there are careers and there are ways that you can do the upward mobility piece.
So just being the director of US-CERT and being inside of DHS, I would venture to say that most of my employees don't want to be the assistant secretary. But as we grow and as US-CERT is expanding its capabilities, we do have career paths. We have training plans. For any of you interested in jobs at US-CERT, we have open positions and recs at USA Jobs, and we welcome you to come and join us. We're getting lots of new technology, hopefully new space soon. Please, 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 somebody new space soon. And yes, it does take a while to get in. We're hoping to fix that. I think, looking forward in how we solve this isn't a government problem. I don't think any of these problems are government problems. I think they're all of our problems. And I think it's more than just the government having scholarship programs to grow these people. As the poster child for the Cyber Corps program, as well as a adjunct professor at George Washington, where I teach for the Cyber Corps program. I encourage you all to give back. I encourage you all to, and yes, teaching is a volunteer sport. So I encourage you all to volunteer, offer to teach a course, mentor not only your employees, but also students at the university level, at the master's level, and the PhD level. I think we all have to contribute to this effort, and it won't succeed unless we do.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Sure.
Everybody knows it.
I'm Rich's friend. And Michelle's friend. I'm Rod Beckstrom, and I was a Fed. Last year I was here on the Fed panel when I was serving as director of the National Cybersecurity Center and working closely with Michelle and actually many of the colleagues here. And I just took on a new job 3 weeks ago, and I'm working as the CEO of ICANN, which I'm really thrilled about, which is a nonprofit organization that works to help support the internet in the background.
Well, the government's a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So thanks for letting me come.
Mike, you want to jump? You want to answer?
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Michelle said, one of the principal reasons that I'm here is to recruit. The Air Force has spent a lot of effort actually to recruit at college campuses to try and garner the talent and pull it into the service. We have many empty jobs. empty slots that we can't fill right now. And we're working hard to do that. I hope the trend is upward as far as U.S. interest in our youngsters.
What you did last year?
As far as
How many did you recruit
well,
last
yeah, our visit here last year. Last year was the first time that I came to one of these things, and at DEF CON in particular, we recruited roughly 60 folks into the Air Force in different capacities, either through enlistment, or some of them were college students and became officers later, and also some civilians. Some of our civilian jobs were filled by some of the candidates that we met there. So it is possible for organizations to go out, federal organizations to populate themselves, but it takes an extraordinary effort, and in particular at certain points, certain good events like this, to move some of that forward.
Okay, I'm going to finish up this question, and while I do that, thanks for coming, Rod. We're going to switch panels now. So if everybody here would grab their tent card and move back, and the guys in the front. So while they're doing that, to finish off on that last question, what we're trying to do is at DC3, is to encourage young people to join the cyber workforce. So 4 years ago here at Black Hat, we announced the Digital Forensics Challenge. And we were getting about 125 teams playing the first year. Last year we had 200 teams. This year went thermonuclear, and we went over 800 teams yesterday. As part of that, on Monday was announced the US-CERT Challenge. The Center for Strategic International Studies and SANS, in cooperation, now have 3 challenges, ours being one of those challenges. So see me, I got some brochures, some posters, and then it's all practice, because what we're contemplating for next year is $1 million award for a challenge. So I'm looking for great ideas for a challenge that would be worthy of $1 million prize. Okay? America's Got Talent. Okay? So, with that being said, see me afterwards. I've got posters and flyers. This time we're going to start on the right side, your left, with John Garris. So if everybody take a chance to introduce themselves.
John Garris, I run the Computer Crimes Division at NASA, Inspector General. I work out of headquarters. Before that, I was with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. I ran their Computer Crimes section. Before that, I had the honor of being at the JTF, as their acronym, Global Network Operations. And I ran the Law Enforcement Counterintelligence Center there. Also, if anyone has any questions about Area 54, please see the gentleman over there with the dark sunglasses. Just look into the can.
My name is Barry Grundy. I'm a special agent with the U.S. Treasury Department, the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration.
Yeah!
Okay.
Overwhelming, isn't it?
I've only been there about 5 months. Prior to that, I worked for John Garris at the NASA Computer Crimes Division. Primarily, we concentrate on computer intrusions and phishing investigations and criminal investigations of those types.
Yeah, my name is Kevin Manson, and I'm a webaholic. Thank you. I was waiting for that. I'm retired Fed, ex-Fed, and I'm not here to sell anything. And so the question is, why am I here? The reason I was here in 2001 is I co-keynoted with a good friend of mine, Bill Tafoya, who did the definitive profile of Ted Kaczynski.
Louder.
Say again, louder? That's not loud enough? Okay, I'm sorry. I won't touch any buttons, Jim. I was here in 2001. I was very glad to be here because I was here recruiting instructors for my training programs at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where we're training cyber cops. And the term cyber cop is something that I coined that term back in the late 80s. And now, if you're asking me why I'm here, I'm not here with the government, I'm not here to help you, but I'm here to help you help each other, because I've been involved since 2000 with a good friend of mine who was the head of security at DARPA. We shook hands in 2000, and we created a cyber cop portal, and it was a PDD 63 initiative. It was a volunteer initiative, and it's still being run today. We have 13,000 users. We have almost 4,000 InfraGard members. And the reason I'm here, continually here, is to pick the brains of as many as you can, but I want to give you an opportunity to join a secure collaborative space to share information, which strangely enough seems to be a new thing these days. But if you are interested, I'd like to point you to a URL. It's cybercopportal.com, all one word. And in the last 10 years, I've been involved with a lot of very interesting people, usual suspects, as I call them.
You gonna let anybody else speak?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I want to give you one
He's
other.
a warrior.
I want to give you one other URL, and that is red tape will not defeat terrorism.
Talk 'em to death.
.com. Okay. Red tape will not defeat terrorism.com. I am having second thoughts about that. If our opponents had to deal with some of the red tape that I saw in the agency I used to work for, we could probably defeat them handily.
My name is Jamie Turner. I'm sorry. My name is Jamie Turner. I work with NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Services. Part of this mission is to prevent and to investigate and solve those crimes that threaten the warfighting capabilities of the Navy and also the Marine Corps. I work as an investigative computer specialist, working in the area of the cyber division, conducting network operations and investigations.
And where are you stationed?
Hawaii.
Okay.
My name is Paul Sternal. I'm the Computer Crimes Program Manager for the Defense Criminal Investigative Service. DCIS is the criminal investigative arm of the DoDIG. I started out in cybercrime investigations when it was still computer crime investigations back in the early 90s, where Jim Christy recruited me into Air Force OSI, and that's a lie. I beat down Jim's door to get into Air Force OSI. Did that for a couple years.
He called me in 1989 and he said, Special Agent Christy, this is Cadet Sternal. I want to be a computer crime investigator. I went, okay, great. So he was a sophomore at GW at the time.
That's right. So that lasted a couple years. And then I worked for the Air Force Information Warfare Center and Air Intelligence Agency on some of our defensive technologies. And it's appropriate that the NSA person that came up with eligible receiver is here, because I missed Fiesta, Texas one year, having to go to the Pentagon and brief the AF-CERT response to that great exercise. Eventually joined DCIS, and we have agents. We have about 40 agents out of 400 that are in our cyber program, investigating intrusions and doing computer forensics on our range of investigations.
How you doing? My name is Gordon Snow. I'm the section chief for the Cyber National Security Section in the FBI. I'm also the director of the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force. In my job as the Cyber National Security Section chief, my job is to coordinate all the counterterrorism, counterintelligence, and criminal investigations and cyber intrusions across our 56 field divisions and our 60 legal attaches, which is growing overseas. In my job as the director of the National Cyber Investigative Joint Task Force, it's to help coordinate, identify, mitigate, disrupt the threat from computer intrusion, same scenario, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, intelligence, and criminal, across the country and across the 18 member agencies that we have out at the NCIJTF.
Right.
Hi, my name's Ray Kesnick. I'm a, as it says on here, ex. I much prefer former or retired. It doesn't quite sound so final. But was with the Defense Cyber Investigative Training Academy, Naval Criminal Investigative Services, the agency I retired from. I'm now the Director of Training for the International Multilateral Partnership Against Cyber Threats, which is based out of Malaysia. It's an organization that our stated mission is to help developing countries as they come online to have the tools and resources necessary to achieve cybersecurity.
Hi, my name is Stéphane Turgeon. I work with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I'm a sergeant there. I'm in charge of the computer crime section in Ottawa, in Canada. I know everyone knows Ottawa, Canada. It's pretty cold. Like here it's 45 degrees, and over there probably today maybe 15 to 20 degrees. We're having a very bad summer this year. What do you say? Celsius, sorry. That's true. That's true. Actually, I've been working with the RCMP for 10 years. I've been general duties for about 5-6 years, dealing with the general bar fights, the whole 9 yards as a police officer, and then I grew up and I took some courses, and then I'm in charge 5 years later on the computer crime section with the RCMP, dealing with terrorism cases, organized crime cases, and fraud cases. I was dealing with theft of $100, and now I'm dealing with $1 million cases, frauds. We also do, of course, computer intrusion cases, which I found they're not really reported to us very often. I'm not challenging you on that, but actually they're not reported to us for several reasons. So here we are from the RCMP. It's my first year here. I'm really happy. And then I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you.
Also, if you would like to get a picture with Steph and his horse later on.
My name is Andrew Freed. I retired from the Treasury Department. Actually, my replacement is Mr. Grundy. I guess they don't have a hair requirement anymore. During the 20 years I was with the agency, I helped develop the Computer Investigative Specialist Program, the System Intrusion Program. I worked with Jerry Dixon at developing the US-CERT, and most recently, my legacy right before I retired was creating a new group in the IRS that's dealing with the online security called the OFDP, or Online Fraud Prevention Detection Group. I'm currently with ISC and also do some work for CERBL, and I wanted to address your question about the bind exploit from yesterday in a second. But basically what I do now is I'm a data researcher. By trade, I'm a data miner. I'm used to working with very large data sets, and I have a fairly unique view of what we're seeing on the internet as a whole, and it's fun work, but I can tell you, I think we're, for lack of a better term, we're in deep shit. It's things are getting worse out there, and it's getting worse geometrically, and I think that all the things that we're trying to do to solve the problems aren't working. And I think we hear a lot of political answers as to what they think they should do and who they should put where. The bottom line is computer security is a technical problem, and it needs a technical solution, and unfortunately the politicians kind of get in the way of that. I think most of us that are in this business, we can pinpoint where badness is coming from. We know how to fix it. We just can't get there from here. Just to go back on the bind issue, for those of you who don't know, there was a zero-day exploit that was released yesterday or the day before. When you're in Vegas, they all kind of merged together. It was a zero-day exploit, but it was a denial of service attack where a single packet hitting your DNS server could take your bind daemon, which is the program that does the DNS resolution, offline. To quote Homer Simpson, dough. It was identified, we reverse engineered the malware, it was patched within an hour, and within 20 minutes after that it was made available. Shit happens, but we did respond extremely timely, and hopefully those of you that are running bind have since upgraded your version, and life goes on until the next problem. Thank you.
2 years ago, you might have read at DEF CON, a Fed got married. That was Andy, who got married in the award ceremony at DEF CON. So if you want to get your picture taken with Andy later, we can do that too.
And I'm still married.
Speaking of being married, Jim Christy has a little habit sometimes of screwing with us when we come in to these things. So he's been known to screw with your hotel room. And when I checked into my hotel room, I did have a surprise there myself, and I did blame it on him, and I apologize, Jim. That wasn't you, but there was a lady in my room, a naked lady in my room, actually. My
and
key
word. You could only get coins.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be my room.
No inflation. No, real live lady. But anyway, it's the wrong room. But anyway, I'm Special Agent Ken Privet with the agent in charge of the Postal Service Digital Evidence Services. We conduct digital forensics for the Postal Service to support the postal crimes that are being investigated. We also conduct the computer crime investigations within the Postal Service. The Postal has a massive computer infrastructure. We don't do all that mail sorting, by hand. There's massive computer infrastructure that does that, and a lot of it is vulnerable to all types of things that can go wrong on the network infrastructure. Prior to coming with Postal, I was with NCIS for some years, and over at DISA, at the US-CERT. Look forward to your questions.
He told me when he was moving from DCIS over that he was going Postal. I was kind of worried about it.
Hi, I'm Bob Hopper. I'm with the National White Collar Crime Center. How many of you ever heard of it? Yeah, that's right. We're the best kept secret in the United States. Our mission is to train state and local law enforcement how to do computer forensics. And we do a pretty good job of that. Some of the other things that we do is research and software validation for forensics tools. We help develop tools for law enforcement that they use every day. We probably have taught the people who work in every agency that's sitting up here on the podium at one time or another. But our focus is to teach state and local law enforcement how to do computer forensics.
Okay, where are our microphones? Matt? Okay, first question for this panel. Right, we got one in the middle here. Don't fall over there.
Thanks. My question is for the gentleman from NASA. Has there been any intrusions from foreign states into our, to get knowledge of our space program, and have you detected any correlations back to the foreign states that are responsible?
Well, I failed to mention that prerequisite before my boss allowed me to come here, is that I'm not speaking on behalf of the agency, just myself, first of all. To answer your question, how do I put this? Of course. Fortunately, well, first of all, in some defense of NASA, the human spaceflight operation gets a lot of play, but also has a science exploration mission. And by statute, they're required to share out that science data, and they do that through partnerships with educational institutions, not just U.S., but also international. By virtue of that, they're in a very exposed posture. So we do enjoy quite a few opportunities to run investigations. We've also been fairly successful by virtue of the fact that we've have received a lot of assistance from the FBI, the Secret Service. This is a partnership endeavor. If you're not talking to people and working with people, you're doing it wrong. And we've had some success. In fact, Barry here had one of the first prosecutions. Well, he's indicted. He's under his ongoing trial in Portugal. We had a successful prosecution of Romania. We have a couple things in the fire of other countries. So it's working. It's very clunky, but to answer your question, yes, we have them, and we have some success. Did that answer it?
We have a question over here. You
Yes.
wrote this down. This is going to be good. Okay.
I just was wondering, like, you were talking about how the politicians are sometimes in the way, and I was wondering...
Who said that? Is that Rich? Okay, just for attribution. That's what we're about.
And I was just wondering, like, when policy's coming up for debate, either in Congress or at a local level, do politicians ever come to ask, security professionals like yourselves what they should be doing and what the consequences of their actions are, or do you kind of have to go and hit them over the head with it, or?
Well, I was talking to Obama just the other day. Yeah, he said, come on over for a beer.
Is it Sam Adams? Anybody want to take that?
I'll make a short comment.
No,
the funding
they
line
don't.
is tied to a lot of things that a lot of the government agencies do. So they're
I'll just address it
quickly is that politicians will come if there's a problem. You know, they're reactive to, there's a huge data breach or something that hit the papers. They'll be there right away. But as far as being proactive, it's rarely will that occur.
Anybody from the back row?
Well, let me
finish up.
add one comment to that. I mean, part of the problem we see is that we have a lot of data traversing continent to continent, country to country. So we can have a politician and laws in the U.S. that won't do squat when we have somebody attacking from some other country. And in the United States, we haven't even been able to coordinate efforts to mandate that ISPs do the right thing. So if we go out and we find some website or some ISP serving 200 samples of malware, we don't even have a stick big enough to say, turn it off, don't keep serving it. So we are so horrifically crippled. Get off my horse.
That's
So the bottom line is, even laws of the U.S. are not going to help the global problem. We need a lot more coordination, and we need better ways of dealing with groups that don't want to cooperate.
Jerry, you want to?
I mean, to your question, yeah, they do ask, the legislators do ask for help, the staffers do ask for help. They reach out to folks in the private sector. Been down when I was in government, been down to the Hill quite a bit. What's interesting is they're just still getting their heads wrapped around this issue. We had to brief 3 members of Congress, and one of them actually got up from their desk, went over to his computer, picked up his computer, his desktop, and goes, "Bad guys can be in this computer right here." I'm sitting there going, "Yes." So, you can see the mental wheels are going there, and they're eventually, getting their heads around this problem and coming up with legislation to deal with it.
Anybody else want to take a shot at that? Okay. Gentleman back here.
With all the certification and accreditation that's been going on, have you all been seeing a decrease in the amount of success of adversaries? And is there a step 2? I mean, once everything's magically 100% certified and accredited and everything's still being exploited and all those crimes are still going on, what's DOD's step 2?
Okay, the answer for the first part was no. I don't think we need to answer the second part. Okay, coin to anybody who answers
I'll address that in part, or maybe not at all. We're certainly not seeing a decline in activity. If anything, as we're getting more people to report, we're identifying additional activity. To kind of piggyback on the policy question, you've got several of us up here that represent IGs. So we have some oversight responsibilities for the federal agencies where we work. One of the things that we found in the Defense Department was that through our investigations, we identified that if you were a defense contractor and you were in possession of unclassified but sensitive defense technology information, perhaps you were doing R&D or developing a weapon system, you experienced an intrusion, there was no requirement to report that. So there are requirements today if banks or hospitals lose healthcare or personal identifying information, but we had sensitive military technology that could be stolen and taken out of the country and not reported. So we work with our own department to put the process, at least to get the process started, to require a reporting and protection of that type of information. So as that happens, I think despite the certifications, as that reporting becomes mandated, we're going to see a larger amount of a problem.
Yes.
So this is a conversation I had with an Inspector General a while back. And the point was oversight and accountability. We understand how to do oversight and accountability of command relationships. We understand how to do oversight and accountability of contractual relationships. But increasingly, the operations we're involved in, which are termed complex operations, where we have military and civilian and NGOs and academia, are covenantal relationships. They're handshakes. The same thing with Web 2.0. We have distributed data storage, and you have all sorts of things over which you do not have traditional hierarchical, neat, tight control. And the point is we have no way, at least in government where we have to account for public monies, of exercising oversight and accountability over covenantal relationships. And so the inspectors general and the general counsel are trying to figure out how to get their arms around this, because their point is, we understand this is where the world is going, but please understand for us that we're required to execute our statutes, and our statutes say you will execute the laws under which things have to operate. So at some point, we're going to have some changes in the way things are done. It was just an interesting discussion to suggest people realize this is going to happen. Not sure how it will. Thanks.
We've got a couple right down front. This gentleman and that one.
I work at a large corporation, and we're asked to share our data with government agencies. What benefit do we get?
Search words don't count.
Well, that's personal. What do we get out of that? You know, why should we be sharing our data with the government when all we see is the potential for getting in the press?
Come on, are you talking about a particular program?
I thought maybe you'd have something to share.
Come on. Share.
No, in general.
You talk about InfraGard.
Well, no, InfraGard, I hear that DC3 has a program they're working on. I thought you guys might want to expand on that.
I'll just make a couple of comments. Under the Comprehensive National Cyber Initiative and a lot of the government efforts right now, the trend is, and it's been brought up by the private sector, to try to get that information back out. So the more information we have in, 85% of the networks is owned by the private sector, the more information we have in, the more comprehensive product we can put back out to you. So we're going through a heavy process in all the agencies right now and throughout the government to try to find what is that right product for that right individual. I think we've spent a lot of time making products and informing the decision makers, which obviously is our job. But we also have to make sure we cover the rest of the sectors throughout the United States in order to make sure we respond effectively to those individuals. So I know in our organization and other organizations we have here, we're trying to get products back out to you based on the information that you're providing to us. And then I know that Jim has a couple other programs he's going to touch on.
No, go ahead. Bob, it's your program, so you should talk about it.
Well, in terms of info sharing, you did?
Right.
Yeah, well, so we have a very successful program with the Defense Industrial Base, where we have 29 partners in a pilot program for the past 2 years, and that program has really, I think, moved the ball up significantly in threat and vulnerability sharing. The good news is we have folks like DC3 as the front door. They bring the law enforcement and counterintelligence and the forensics ops experience. That front door is building a trust path with all the partners. We're passing forensics information back and forth almost in real time. We've created a classified network to share information with them, both voice and data, with the DIBBers, as we call them. And so I think it's going to be a real model for a lot of other sectors. So I think we've really advanced threat and vulnerability sharing significantly. And I think we are beginning to, at least the feedback we get from the DIB partners is significantly enhancing their ability to defend against a lot of this malicious activity. So I don't know if that's the answer to the question or not. So I'm not sure where it came from, so I apologize.
From
okay,
down
I'm
here.
sorry.
So why, I'm seeing different agencies coming to companies, knocking on our door. Why isn't there one coordinated effort?
That's a great question, but I think DHS is actually pulling that together. Of course, the DIB is just one sector of all the sectors, and so DHS has been in the middle of allowing this to continue to mature, and they're taking the leadership in other sectors. So I think they're bringing that all together. I'll let Michelle, she's kind of knocking me out of the way, so I'll let her do that.
Well, and just as an example, I don't know who asked the question because I was sitting back there.
just as an example, this week, in several of the vulnerabilities that were announced here, we worked in concert with some of the vendors and did some releases to all of the sectors, and we did not mark them FOUO, and they were free for complete distribution. We also have the US-CERT website that also has our alert that anyone can sign up for, and we do distribute vulnerability information that way. We're trying to expand and share as much as possible, as thoroughly as possible, with as many of the sector players that will play with us. So I do think there is a good exchange of information. If there's somebody contacting you specifically that you'd like to ask a question to, that would be great to know who it is you're talking about. Thanks.
Next question. Can you pass that back about 2 rows, please?
Hey, this one's addressed to the fellow from the RCMP, since you seem a little bit lonely up there. You mentioned in the outset that you had some concerns with the number of crimes that were being reported to the RCMP, or the lack thereof. What would be the appropriate process to go through? The last time I interfaced with the RCMP on anything beyond the laptop got stolen, it was a one-time password exploit up in the Yukon Territory. And as you can imagine, they weren't too up in 1995 on that sort of tech up there.
Of course, if you were reporting a crime in 1995 in the Yukon territories, they'd probably look at you with very, big eyes.
They asked me to help them solve the crime.
Yeah, but definitely if you have a crime to report that's happened in Canada or occurred from Canada, definitely the agency here will liaise with our agency in Canada, and then we'll work together. We do this every day, working with the U.S. authorities here, either FBI or other agencies. So that's the way to report. I'm sorry.
Miscommunicated. I am actually Canadian. I live in Toronto.
Oh, okay.
I'm down here like you to escape the cold weather.
Are you from Yukon?
No.
Okay.
Toronto now.
We'll talk later.
Hey, you guys want to take this outside?
That's all right.
That's all right. Anyway, I was just wondering if there was a process to report other than calling the local Toronto police, like I do when I get a stolen laptop.
It's going to be your local police, and then Toronto police or where you are, they will liaise with the RCMP over there. It depends on the crime.
Yeah.
If it's, it depends on the jurisdiction as well. It's the same thing as happens in the United States. If the crime occurs, it overpasses the Ontario jurisdictions or something, definitely the RCMP will handle that.
And where are the policy people from Canada?
I'm sorry?
Where are the policy people from Canada? They sent you and nobody else.
No, that's me. That's only.
Thank you.
Budget's tight.
Send the best.
Okay.
That's it.
Next question.
I would like to follow up on that. The RCMP, the relationship with U.S. across the board and RCMP really rocks. These guys know what they're doing. When we call them up, we have a remarkable response. They, a few years back, we called up RCMP, and within a day, they had some kid crying in a room. I mean, things work quickly. I mean, they really know what they're doing. I don't mean that by hurting someone.
Gordon says they're allowed to waterboard up there.
$20 there.
Anybody over right here?
And this is kind of a question for all of you. As the Obama administration looks at all of the things that are sort of priorities for them, whether it's healthcare, the economy, and that sort of thing, do you sort of look at it and say, we're pretty far down the priority list and probably nothing's going to happen anytime real soon?
We'll start with NASA.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you for giving me my own microphone. What was that, an opportunity to catch me whining or something? Is that some sort of sucker punch? I mean, again, talking from our perspective, I'm heartened by all the attention that is being mustered across the board. Like many of the people here, I've been working this for a number of years, and The good news is there's hopefully we're close to critical mass of senior leadership paying more and more attention to it. I mean, I see it in my own agency. I'm seeing it a little bit more when we work with other agencies. So it looks like we're on an upward trend. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, it yields some resources.
Okay, Hop. There's your plug. He's a nonprofit. He doesn't have any money. We got about 2 minutes for questions. Any more? Anybody else? We have one back here.
This, over the past couple of days, we've seen a lot. Mr. Lentz discussed this morning how we're migrating to more content-centric form of operating in our computer environment. The classes today, we saw a lot of cloud computing, software as a service, platform as a service. So what I'm kind of curious about is our federal government going to get more security-centric with respect to the regulations as opposed to a compliance-centric as it is now?
So that's a question for the policy guys. That was the last panel, sir.
Well, you didn't call on me. I raised my hand like 5 times. I was doing that all day.
Next question. Go, yeah, okay. Well, all right, you owe me.
Okay, I'll take a shot at this, having sat through the White House interagency policy meetings every 2 weeks last year and until I left in March. So I think your question is about, is it going to move from compliance sort of orientation towards a security or measured security and outcomes orientation? And that's an excellent question. It's a real challenge, to do that. And you're right, it's the right thing to do, right? Because we want to get to the end point and the objective, and otherwise we can set up incredible numbers of wickets, and policies and procedures and reporting, but what's the benefit going to be? And that insight that you have was one of the things that led some of us at Homeland Security and myself to work in an area of developing an economic model for cybersecurity, because a lot of my background was actually in risk management and finance, in global finance and trading. And what I realized in coming into cybersecurity is we didn't have a risk management model. And looking at that, then I realized you can't have a risk management model for cybersecurity until you know what the network is worth that you're defending, right? So it says, how can you know how much to spend? And then how do you know which programs can lead towards that outcomes? And so if you want to learn about this, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning at DEF CON, I'm speaking and actually presenting the model, the economic models that can be used. And one of the goals of that, and the reason we worked on it, was to inform the policy discussion. Because, America alone and other countries around the world are spending many billions of dollars on these federal programs. And the real question should be, what's the net add to security? What's the benefit we've got? So the question becomes, what are the metrics then? How do we measure and determine which projects to do? And how do we define the outcomes and the goals? So, the other thing I'll mention on that note, and Michelle and her group does a fabulous job with US-CERT, but part of what we're doing at ICANN now is relating to supporting private sector-led initiatives like the Conficker Working Group or the Conficker Cabal, which has done a very strong job overall in trying to counter Conficker, which is still very much alive, as you know, but significantly tamped down from where it would be. And I think that one of the other challenges for government is to figure out how to support those private sector-led efforts or allow them to happen and interface with them meaningfully. Anyway, I think you're on to exactly the right issue, and I hope to see you 10 a.m. tomorrow morning at DEF CON. Thanks.
One last question. Good, because the microphone's right behind you.
Yes, one of my recurring questions is, I haven't really seen DoD come out and say what would constitute an act of war in cyberspace. And if we don't draw any lines in the sand, it kind of invites people to keep pushing those boundaries. And so you see things like GhostNet, you see other things that may or may not be attributed to other countries. If we don't come out and draw any lines, aren't we inviting people to take more advantage?
I'll take a stab at that one. It's kind of like pornography. We'll know it when we see it.
That's right.
Okay. Okay, tomorrow at 6 o'clock at DEF CON, we're going to repeat some of this, so if you didn't get your questions answered, please show up. We're also going to play Spot the Lamer, and I see quite a few of you here. So,
Ask how many are law enforcement in the audience.
how many are law enforcement in the audience?
And are willing to admit it.
Nobody, okay. Thanks, appreciate your help.